Hey guys, and welcome back to Joko Yo. So many of you guys know that I'm a high school teacher. I've been for a long time, long enough to have taught a student, and in a little bit of time later, it feels just like maybe 5 years or so, find myself teaching that person again, except, wait, it looks like that person I just taught. But maybe not exactly, just a little bit different. But then I could have sworn, oh my God, this new student is the kid of a former student, and then you feel old. So you check the year. Oh no, have I been teaching that long? Yes. So I have seen that no matter pretty much what year it is, when you tell people that I teach high school, I always hear a negative stereotype about teenagers, and the funny thing is that it's always the same stereotypes. I mean, they talk back. Well, not usually. They're whiny sometimes. They can't listen or pay attention. Well, sometimes. 20 years ago, they couldn't pay attention because they were thinking of video games or social situations. 15 years ago, they were thinking about Facebook, or maybe 10, they were thinking about Twitter, and then Snapchat, and then TikTok, etc. But, that's sort of the point of this whole episode. Even though some things look like they've changed, those are really just surface changes. Things don't really change that much. Like, your clothes may be different, but you're still wearing clothes. You know what I'm saying? Well, in the summer months, when I was young, I would stay with my grandparents during the day while my parents worked. I would wake up at their house in the morning to two sounds. One, my grandmother making breakfast and prepping food for the evening at the same time. And the other sound was, sacred. Because if I were to walk into her kitchen during the hours of 8 to 9:30, I was not to speak or to make a sound unless she indicated that it was okay to do so. Now, I don't know what the penalty was for breaking this silence. It was such an understood rule that I, and probably to my own benefit, never bothered to find out. That's probably why I'm still alive. Well, at 8 a.m., or just before, households all over southern Johnston County simultaneously clicked, or close to it, clicked on their radios to AM 780 WCKB to listen to a show called Good Morning Charlie. And the sacred silence began to be observed. This particular program was everything. I mean, on Good Morning Charlie, you could find out, one, announcements like birth, death, marriages, etc. These were not collected by Mr. Charlie Fowler, who was a namesake of the show. These were called in by listeners, so you can send in well wishes or birthday greetings and even respond to those that were sent to you and broadcast for all to hear, and you get to have your 15 minutes of fame. I mean, in a way, we had Facebook and Twitter, and we even used our phones. It was just called Good Morning Charlie. Hey, you could also announce things that you had to sell, and another person would respond if they wanted to buy that item and make arrangements to pick it up. So we had like eBay and Craigslist. It's just called Good Morning Charlie. Mr. Charlie would even give out the weather forecast. There's the weather app. But the thing that always perked up my grandmother's ears, and the only one that perked up mine because it revealed my immediate future on Saturdays, was when someone would call in announcing a yard sale, which were the modern equivalent of thrift stores. I guess outdoor thrift stores. There were a few rules that you had to abide by. I'm not going to go into them all here, but look, if there was time after yard selling, which could last all morning, and if my grandmother had the inclination, we may well hit the flea markets, where who knows what you would find. If you've ever been to a flea market, you know. Flea markets are like the grandfathers of impulse buying. Again, eBay, if you will. And no shipping costs, because you ain't got to ship it. Myself, I went to pick up packs of cheap blank tapes primarily. That's what I was in for. I also like to pick up a Polaroid camera. I did it once. I picked up a Polaroid camera one time, and I guess that's kind of like Instagram, but with an actual physical photograph that you can actually hold and not lose. It's kind of like Snapchat, except the photographs, they don't disappear after so many minutes. Either way, so I could find tapes of music, not at the flea market, usually not original from the manufacturer, mind you, but the people that sold these tapes did what I was planning to do with blank tapes if I could find some, make copies and sell them. I'm guilty as I can be. Like I could find like a cheap ZZ Top knockoff, like someone recorded it off of another tape. I could pick up myself some blank tapes, take them home, put the ZZ Top in the play cassette deck, put the blank tape in the recording deck of my jam box, and press the buttons and make magic happen. I made copies this way, and I sold them. Like, if you're even younger than I am, but still older than some of my listeners, y'all, it's like, it's like Napster, except you don't get busted, I guess. See, sometimes I would stand at the radio, get the right station, and wait for good songs. And if you're around my age, you do the same thing. Wait for good songs and then press record so I could have my own copies of the songs. It's going to cut off the first few seconds and the last few seconds, but you got it. If you're of a certain range of ages, you know exactly what I mean. I guess that was like iTunes, Spotify, Pandora, whatever streaming service you use, so we had that too. I had my first experience with history podcasts on radio too. Believe it or not, yes, I had my first experience with history podcasts. Of course, it wasn't called a podcast then, it was Paul Harvey. And it's one of the reasons why I started this thing that I'm doing right now. See, Paul Harvey's The Rest of the Story helped put me on a lifelong path. If you've never heard this short program, you are missing out. If you like this, that's like the stuff. It is a relic from an earlier age, definitely, and was itself inspired by an even earlier age. You see, commercial radio came before TV, but the gap between the start of commercial radio and TV is not as wide as you may imagine. In the late 1910s, we already had companies like General Electric, General Motors, Ford, and these were then, like now, major names. There were other huge names that did not retain their major league status, companies like Zenith and Westinghouse, for example. Westinghouse made large profits like those guys, and also, like Ford, tried to save money too. You don't get rich by spending the money, Westinghouse had several facilities in the early 1900s in Cleveland, Ohio, Newark, New Jersey, Springfield, Massachusetts, and had its headquarters in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Now, these facilities had to communicate between them naturally, so telephone and telegraph costs were a large expense for them. So, to save money, Westinghouse turned to free radio waves, broadcasting at first Morse code over radio waves and then switched to voices, so they wouldn't have to pay for telephone and telegraph. It was a bit of a novelty. Yeah, it was kind of neat. How cool, right? Well, it wasn't long before people in Pittsburgh began buying receivers to pick up signals. A lot of them worked at Westinghouse, and it would probably be good to know what the company was planning out. The higher-ups at Westinghouse soon became aware of the listeners, and instead of getting mad, Westinghouse decided to get richer, making and selling Westinghouse radios themselves. Changed their radio call letters to KDKA, and used the signal to make announcements to get scoops so that people would want to buy more radios. For example, Westinghouse was able to promote the fact that they would be broadcasting the results of the 1920 presidential election in real time and as the results came in. This was definitely a first. And their radio sales went right through the roof. You don't have to wait till tomorrow, find out tonight. Now, people had radios and wanted new reasons to use them. So after the election, now what do you do? Well, by the way, this is also how the internet got started, about 60 or 50, depending on who you talk to, years later. The internet itself, just like this, was meant for one purpose, and the people just kind of joined in and it became something else. But Westinghouse began to produce entertainment programs. There was one in which someone would simply just read the comic strips, but you only could hear them on KDKA. Until another company saw the money and decided to join in. Now, the Radio Corporation of America, standing for RCA, not only wanted a slice of this pie, they wanted the whole pie. Westinghouse, meanwhile, established other stations in Newark, New Jersey, now WABC in New York City, WBZ in Boston, and they could all share their programs back and forth, which means you now have 3 stations that can make original programming, try to compete with RCA. Voice actors would perform their program, and then another one would be scheduled, and the first voice actors would leave the studio or at least get set up for the new program, and then others maybe would come in. So in between programs, it took the station about 3 to 5 minutes to allow for the transition from one program to the other one, so that no one was listening to dead air, and so that no one was tempted to turn that dead air into an opportunity to turn the station to RCA. The Westinghouse stations would invite musicians to fill the gap, bringing music to radio for the first time. Usually they were church groups, since they would play for free. Again, a penny saved. But the radio managers found that the acoustics in their Pittsburgh station were horrible for music. The walls were mostly cinder block, and the echo was ridiculous. So they tinkered with the walls, eventually putting tent canvas in front of the walls, and in the process, they invented the modern recording studio and studio design. So look what we got here. We got radio, we got music, and now we've got. This is smart, and by the way, it's also one of the reasons why most of the songs that we could buy on 45s way back when were only like 3 to 4 to 5 minutes, again, to fill that gap. In 1921, RCA was broadcasting sporting events, from, say, Jack Dempsey fights to the first radio baseball game, which was the Pittsburgh Pirates versus the Philadelphia Phillies, live from Forbes Field. Then they broadcast the first college football game. In 1922, KDKA, under Westinghouse, carried Will Rogers' first radio broadcast. RCA had deep pockets and wanted to corner the market, and Westinghouse needed revenue to prevent that from happening, so they decided to sell advertisements in between programs as well as music. They had to have a money war chest. They also began to promote alliances of sorts with other independent radio stations that they began popping up all over the country very soon, and who felt justifiably threatened by RCA. So these alliances, also known as networks, served as the model from here on out. Westinghouse Network, and the first network, again Westinghouse's, was called the National Broadcasting Company, otherwise known as NBC. The first radio station in North Carolina, WBT in Charlotte, joined, or at least became affiliated with Westinghouse's NBC. Made sense, since the station was started as a partnership between employees of Westinghouse, General Electric, and Southern Bell. The telephone company eventually figured it out. They soon joined another network that popped up in, competition to the National Broadcasting Company. They joined the Columbia Broadcasting System, otherwise known as CBS. And the first radio station in this area was started by an insurance company. Go figure that out. It was started by the Durham Life Insurance Company, who had farm insurance as a large part of their business. And so it specialized in area farm reports. Again, makes sense. But they didn't forget that their life insurance interests were also still there. So they used their call letters as WPTF, which stands for We Protect the Family. The director of this farm news at WPTF was named Connie Gay. He was not related to Marvin at all, but he was from Lizard Lick. This guy named Connie Gay would go on to later discover Patsy Cline. Bill Monroe, Lester Flatt, Earl Scruggs would sometimes perform in the WPTF studio, which was patterned after the design that KDKA set up way back with canvas on the walls. And listening to these early broadcasts at WPTF back in the 30s, and pretending to be a radio man himself, was a young boy named Carl Lamb. According to him and in his book, he said he would speak into his cereal box to try to get the desired sound effect and announce right alongside of what was being said on the radio. And when he got older, I guess the ambition stayed because he was hired by a man named Ray Wilkinson. Locals may remember this guy as the guy that did the farm reports for WRAL all the way into the 1990s. But Ray Wilkinson hired him to Rocky Mount's station, WCEC, in the 40s. And he ended up at WMPM in Smithfield, where most Johnston residents have heard of him from. But in between Carl Lamb's Rocky Mount stay and his Smithfield stay, Mr. Lamb worked for a while at WCKB in Dunn, where years later, Good Morning Charlie would announce the yard sales and accordingly my Saturday agenda. If I got lucky, I could find some tapes and make a little pocket change, and that evening, I could turn on the radio again to hear Paul Harvey tell me the rest of the story. And I would think, back when I was a kid, about how telling little unknown sides of history was like the coolest thing ever. Maybe one day I might do just that. And y'all, I have had a blast with this one, more than I thought I would. And I hope you enjoyed it. And until next time, guys, be good.